I like my puns, but I think with this one, it can only go one way, and I don't think any of us want to go that way. So, with that, today we got Jabril Cox from LSU, another linebacker. We're going to keep it going. How you doing, Mike?
Doing well. An interesting guy, to say the least, in terms of his journey, because you look at the stats and you see only one season, right? At LSU, was a 4-year player at North Dakota State University. Obviously, the Bison was a 3-time FCS champion. Was the MVFC Defensive Player of the Year in 2018, as well as the MVFC Freshman of the Year in 2017. Graduates after 4 years, transfers into LSU, and then I would say had a pretty good season. So, Mike, even though we don't have those North Dakota State numbers. Obviously, we know they're solid based on some of those accolades that he had. Are you glad at least to have seen him instead of, say, Dylan Radins, right, a prospect that I did who plays for North Dakota State, just going straight from there to the NFL, right? There's obviously some competition concerns. Are you glad to at least have seen Cox try to do a grad transfer year, play that 5th season, and put together a pretty productive season here with the Tigers?
Absolutely. And I think, first of all, coming off 4 years, what school had interest in him? The reigning champs, coming out of 2019, LSU. So I think that speaks to his production you saw beforehand. And absolutely, coming against SEC talent, obviously you got premier talent he's going against, some premier offenses. And he performed really well, I thought. I liked what I saw on film. So absolutely, I think that 5th year, sometimes we have the conversation, is there not enough, sample size, or is there too much? Which often a little bit more conversation when it comes to running backs. But I think for him having that 5th year definitely helped. Seeing him, also getting tape that for me and you, Mike, that we could find, because just finding the stats for his North Dakota State days was hard enough. So no, I think I appreciate it. I think it brings him into that consideration for the earlier rounds, and um, I like what I saw.
No, most certainly. I know, it's one thing to be facing SEC competition compared to Central Arkansas and Delaware, right? Teams like that I had to watch Radins play a couple videos back. So I definitely agree that it was a more valuable season than had he just tried to declare straight away out of 2019, because I really don't know how many people's radars he was on, right? So then kind of getting into the grade, just in terms of what I think and what I thought he did well. First and foremost, obviously, range and pursuit. I would say that he's a rangy guy. He's an athletic guy, 6'4", 231. So definitely has a good frame, a good body. The only thing I would say with the pursuit side of things is sometimes the angles were a little bit questionable. And especially a part of LSU, their defense would run a 4-2-5 a good bit of the snaps. I would say that I was pretty disappointed considering his proximity to the ball, how often he was in close proximity to the ball carrier, right? I did think coverage was certainly a strength. I know some people are saying that he is the best coverage linebacker in the class. I don't agree with that when we have, say, Owusu Koromoa or Baron Browning, but I think he was very solid. One thing that a lot of people probably look at is those 3 interceptions from last year and assume that that means that he's some great coverage linebacker. Again, as I talked about previously, those 3 INTs only show you what happened on 3 snaps, right? If he was in coverage for another 400 snaps, that means he could have had 397 receptions led up against him. So you kind of have to take that into comparison when you're trying to understand the sort of distribution of his play-to-play consistency, right? I thought he looked good, but no, there weren't necessarily 14 to 15 traits shown, right? I think that he was solid, but not to the caliber of those other guys. In terms of his block shedding, I thought that he was not very physical, right? And we've seen that with some other guys in terms of, say, Micah Parsons by example, but he's gotten around it just due to his athleticism as well as kind of his finesse when it came to taking on blockers. I didn't necessarily see that with Cox. One kind of funny comment that I read while I was watching film on him was on the Ole Miss game, right? Somebody put in the comment section, Jabril Cox is easy to scout in this video because he is the only guy in the LSU front 7 whose jersey remained white from the beginning of the game until the very end. And I think that, as facetious as that comment may or may not be, I do think there is some truth in it, right? Because he wasn't necessarily the guy taking on blockers who was flying around the field doing all these various things. He was very much so a more, at least in my eyes, stagnant player than his athleticism should suggest, right? If that makes any sense. And then from there, I thought his IQ and awareness, again, was very solid as a coverage player, right? Moving backwards, I feel like he did a very good job in terms of, again, just keeping an eye on who's entering his zone while also keeping an eye on the quarterback. But again, against the run, I thought that like there were certainly some question marks, to say the least, as well as finishing and tackling. Right, I just, let alone having said that he wasn't around the ball as much as I had hoped. Even when he was around the ball, I thought things were kind of sloppy. That's one of the lower grades that I've given to this point. But overall, a 69.75, which is most certainly solid. By all means, that's right around the third round, as we'll get into my big board on the next slide. But Mike, what are your thoughts on the grade? Do you agree, disagree? Where are you at on Cox?
Disagree a little bit. You're probably a little bit lower on him than I am. I saw a little bit more range in pursuit. I think maybe that coverage skills. I think it's there. I just didn't see it a ton on film, but when he was asked to do it, I think he did a pretty good job. I'd agree. Block shedding definitely concern. He definitely um, wasn't great at taking on offensive linemen head on, and didn't do a great job of getting around them, maybe using some of that athleticism. So I'm with you for most of the part, maybe a little higher in motor, just a little bit higher, probably a couple points here and there. So probably end up being well, let's get into the big board, and I'll kind of go where I'd have them. So yeah, take a look at the big board. I'd probably have them a little bit higher in that third round. So um, probably closer to the top end. I think it's a conversation, Dylan Moses or Jabril Cox. They're both hand in hand for me. Like the grades, it's a 1A, 1B, and you almost might want to put Dylan Moses above Jabril Cox. I think I liked what I saw from Cox a little bit more, but um, smaller sample size at a SEC school. Dylan Moses has been productive for a little bit longer of a time, and just to be able to play in that Alabama defense in his freshman season, I think that speaks a lot. So I think I'd give him the benefit of the doubt just from that. I think that speaks a lot, especially how um, that school is a powerhouse when it comes to just college football in general. So, but I think it's really close. I think it's probably more where I'd have him at.
No, I can see that. And, it's interesting that you bring up the coverage, right, as maybe not having been as strong as I might have thought it was on film. Considering other people, like I said, they're all in on him as a coverage linebacker. I know PFF overall, they ranked him as their 45th highest prospect in the draft, which to me, that just seems significantly too high, I think, for both of us. And then CBS Sports had him as number 85, which I would argue is more in line, at least with what I'm saying, maybe a little bit low for you. But I think he's an interesting guy. He's a guy who probably more so fits the wave of the modern NFL, right? In terms of being comfortable playing backwards and working those various angles opposed to simply playing downhill. But I think it's almost at the detriment of his downhill game. I just don't think that he's very strong there when it comes to filling gaps, taking on blockers, let alone successfully defeating those blockers. I just didn't really see a ton there. I also thought he was kind of sloppy in terms of diagnosing plays that were on the ground because, like that commenter kind of hinted at, I don't know how interested he was in making those plays on the ground. I know you said you disagreed with motor. I think that's kind of where my concerns come in, but no, I think an interesting prospect nonetheless. For my team, at least, I wouldn't want him necessarily in the second round. I would cry myself to sleep if we took him in the top 45 prospects. But I do think that there's certainly some value and a spot for him the further and deeper you get into the draft. I know I would say he's a decent bit better than a guy like Cameron McGrone. I think he's a little more well-rounded there and has just one significantly stronger aspect in my eyes. But he also has a higher ceiling as well. Like I said, 6'4", 231. You could put some weight on that frame. You could teach him some techniques, but you really can't teach that size and sort of baseline athleticism. So an interesting guy. As I said, Mike, do you have any really closing thoughts here, or are we just about done?
I think we're about done. Yeah, I think there's some consideration there. I think he does fit that modern age linebacker, but I'm with you. I think it's a tight race when it comes to that third round grade there. So anywhere you take him, I understand it. But I think it's all I got on Jabril Cox. But if you guys have anything else on this channel, you should comment, leave a like, subscribe. If you're an LSU fan and actually think Jabril Cox is, the rebirth of Levante David, let us know. We're interested. I don't see it. Mike doesn't see it, but maybe you do, and let us know why. We appreciate when people comment, or if you have, maybe another LSU player you'd like for us to do, we'll do it. Hey, so we enjoy doing this, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed the videos. So I think with that, I think we mic'd up and we mic it out. Deuces.
Peace, guys. I know I did want to say real quick before we get out of here, his birthday is actually on April 16th, the day after we're filming this, probably a couple days prior to it being posted. So obviously, happy belated birthday to Mr. Cox. I wish you well at the next level. I wish you well at your pro day on April 26th. A little bit interesting there. We didn't talk about it. Not sure why he's having his pro day 3 days before the draft, but hey, maybe you're going to have a meteoric rise up draft boards just before they have to write your name on an envelope, baby. So with that being said, now I think we're mic'd up. Now I'm mic'ing out. Peace, guys.